Hello everyone, have you ever wanted to paper piece tiny little pieces to make a little 3.5-inch star? Paper piecing will make the star beautiful. This little flying geese right here is 3/4 inches by 1.5 inches. Super tiny and probably a little frustrating to piece using traditional methods, but with paper piecing it will be a breeze. Here are some of the tools we need to get started. We'll need a rotary cutter. It doesn't matter what size, but you want a good sharp blade because we're going to be cutting through both paper and fabric. This is a 45mm cutter, but you can use any size. And you want, of course, a nice mat to go with it. This is a 1/4 plus ruler. It has a nice lip on one side that'll snug up against the paper as you're trimming your 1/4 inch seam. That just makes it really easy to do. This is an 1/8 ruler. It's the same thing. It has a little tiny 1/8 inch lip that'll help you trim really perfect seams. The 1/8 is really nice on these small pieces. You can also just use a regular ruler that has 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch markings. This is a Creative Grids ruler, makes it really simple to find the 1/4 inch. The 1/8 inch is a little tougher to see, but it's still marked and it's easy to use. You'll want some pins and of course your pattern pieces. These are the little sizes that we're going to be using for this particular block, which finish at 3/4 inches by 1.5 inches. And this is the larger size for the same block, which is 1.5 by 3. You'll need your pieces cut to size. In the pattern that I have listed down below that these pieces go with, I tell you the appropriate sizes. We're going to cut larger and trim down to size. And you want something that you can fold your templates against. I'm just using a piece of mail cardboard that I got. And of course you'll want some presser feet. You want something where you can see where the needle's going because you're going to be sewing on the line that's marked on the pattern. So an open toe foot like the one on the left with a wide margin is really good. Or for me, my 1/4 inch foot gives me a much narrower margin but still plenty of space to see the line when I'm sewing. That's my preferred foot to use. However, you can use whichever one makes you feel more comfortable. This is what our template looks like. The pattern is cut. I trimmed about a 1/4 inch outside of the lines, which will make our final trimming up that much easier. The solid line indicates the finished lines of the piece. There's the dashed line, and that is the cut size, which is what we'll be trimming our block to. The inside diagonal lines are actual stitching lines, so we'll be stitching on those lines. Remember, if you can see it, you can sew it. The first thing we're going to do is pre-fold our template on the sewing lines. We're going to give it a good hard crease on those lines. This will make removing the paper at the end so much easier. I'm using a thicker, almost cardstock paper here, and you'll see it tears away with no problem. But the pre-folding is the real key to making this work. On this block, it's really easy because there's only the 2 lines to fold back. You use the cardboard to slip into the crease, give it a nice firm crease with your fingertips, and you'll be on your way. There are a lot of these flying geese in the block I'm doing because there's 8 3.5 inch stars. So there's 32 of these papers that need to be folded. So let's get started making our block. Here on the pattern, you'll see the numbers. Number 1 represents where the first piece goes. These pieces are cut larger, so you don't have to worry about whether or not they'll fit. There's the good side and the wrong side of the fabric. The wrong side of the fabric is going to go against the blank side of the pattern piece. And we're going to match it up, line it up, And we're going to hold it up to the light so that we can make sure we have 1/8 of an inch on each side of the triangle that's hanging out over the edge. That's our seam allowance. Once you have it, go ahead and pin it in place. Don't pin through your sewing lines though. Keep that pin well away from those. Now we're going to fold back on the crease, and we're going to take our add 1/8 ruler and we're going to trim it up to size. Fold back your paper and snug your ruler up against that folded edge, creating that 1/8 inch lip that you need to get a perfect seam allowance. Take your rotary cutter and trim it away. Now, since we have it right here, let's do it on the other side. You can see that wonderful 1/8 inch. It'll be more than enough for what we need. Snug the ruler up against the paper and trim it away. And you see again that nice 1/8 of an inch. If you don't have an add 1/8 ruler and you want to use a regular ruler, you do the same thing, but you match those 1/8 inch lines up against the paper so that you have 1/8 of an inch hanging out, and you trim away just the same as you did. I like the add 1/8 better because it has that lip that catches the paper that just makes it so easy. But this works just as well too. Now it's time to add the next piece. The pattern is numbered to show you which order to sew it in. So we need number 2, which is a white goose or a wing, I guess it would be. And it'll go right sides together with the blue fabric. We're going to line up the cut edges. We know that's a good 1/8 inch seam, so we're going to add that white to the cut edge and leave it hanging out on both sides. See how it's bigger? That's giving us room for fudging at the end. So we're going to put a pin in it. Keep the pin away from your sewing lines. You don't want it anywhere near there. And we're going to take out the holding pin that was just holding our blue fabric on. We're going to sew between 1 and 2 on that solid line. So let's take it to the machine. Our machine is set up for a straight stitch. The 3.5 on this is just showing that my needle is in the center position. The 1.5 is the stitch length. We want a small stitch length to perforate the paper. And we're going to sew on that line right there, right between 1 and 2. So put it under your foot, line up the needle, make sure it's going to hit right on the line, and you're just going to sew straight down. Some people like to sew off the paper and come in so that the line extends the whole length, but I like to stay just within where the line shows. So I do a tiny little back stitch at the beginning, at the end, and that just makes it easier for me to tear off the paper at the end. But you can do what's comfortable for you. If you have a lot of these to sew, like you would for Meteor Garden, you can just chain stitch them one after the other. And you'll see you've got a nice 1/8 inch seam on the back, plenty of room. So let's press it. We'll take it to our pressing mat, open it out and give it a good press. I like steam, so I'm going to give it a nice shot of steam, just to make sure that it lays nice and flat. Now you'll see it's pretty wonky on that side over there, but that's okay because in the end we're going to trim it off. We just want fabric that reaches all the way around it. Now we're going to do the same thing between 1 and 3. We're going to add another wing, and we're going to line it up on the cut edges. Pin it in place. And we're going to sew on that line between 1 and 3. Remember to keep your pin away from your sewing line. And we're going to stitch on that line between 1 and 3. A little back stitch at the beginning, straight down, and then a little back stitch at the end. That'll just make it so that when you pull out the paper, it won't tear out your stitches as well. Now we're going to press this out. We're going to fold it back on itself and give it a good press. Again, I like steam, so I'm going to give it a shot of steam while it's down. And believe it or not, this is the makings of that cute little flying geese. It looks all wonky and terrible right now, but we're going to trim it up on that dashed line and you'll see how cute and perky it is. And it'll give us that wonderful 1/4 inch that we need to get a nice crisp point. So we're going to trim right on those dashed lines. It's a little tricky sometimes because of the 2 seams that cross on the bottom. The ruler can kind of wiggle on you. So just hold it tight and you'll do fine. And there, now we've got this cute little flying geese with the proper seam allowance. It's a good 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you've got that nice point at the bottom so that when you sew it into your block, it's going to look perfect. This is the block for Meteor Garden. And like I said, it takes 8 3.5 inch stars and 1 6.5 inch star. And it comes out looking so beautiful. If you enjoyed putting together this little flying geese, then you'll want to put together 32 of them for this nice block in Meteor Garden, which you can check out in the links down below. I hope to see you again. Bye!